Hi, I'm Liz Agbor-Tabi, Vice President at Global Citizen, and I'm thrilled to be on the Dentaa show today.
From being a critical nurse, qualified her master's in public health, to Rockefeller Foundation, and now she is the Vice President of Global Citizen. When it comes to policy, she's an entrepreneur, she's a business, she likes flowers, she does everything. And I'm honored to be sitting right next to her to talk about her journey and how she can inspire you on your journey. She's African, she's from Cameroon, married to a Nigerian, and also she loves Ghana. Sis, welcome to the Dentaa show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so incredibly thrilled to be here today.
Thank you so much. Did you know that I was a nurse?
Of course I did.
You did?
Of course. I mean, in everything that I do, I come prepared.
Right.
I think preparation is key, right? So I did my research also, figured out all the things you were into.
Right. But how did you move from being a nurse to going into Rockefeller? Was it Rockefeller actually your second job?
So I've had a storied career over 20-something years. I just told my age because I'm kind of only 25, but I started young. You know, I initially began my career as a critical care nurse, working at the bedside in an urban setting in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins, and worked with vulnerable populations, with communities that were grappling with poverty, with health disparities, and a whole host of social, economic, environmental challenges. And I realized fairly early in my career that I wanted to do more, and that taking care of patients at the bedside, one patient at a time, one family at a time, was creating impact, but not on the scale that I sought to create. And so I got into public policy, public health, worked with the federal government in the United States, worked with state governments, worked with municipal governments, did policy, always with an emphasis on vulnerable populations. And then that work led me to Africa and Asia and Latin America. Always at the core of everything that I did was ensuring that there was a level playing field for populations, communities really, that otherwise wouldn't have that sort of access and equity, etc. Yeah.
Okay. But growing up, did you always wanted to be a nurse? Like, was it something that you had written down that I'm going to be a nurse?
So that's always a good question. So I am the product of African immigrant parents in the United States, and I was told I should be a doctor. My brother would be an engineer, and then my sister would be a pharmacist, and then my other brother, a lawyer. Yeah, I think it was lawyer, engineer, doctor, pharmacist for us. But I had other ideas. I also grew up in the age of MTV, when MTV was really about music television.
Yes.
And after watching a number of Madonna interviews, I wanted to be a dancer.
And I bet they were like, no way.
Absolutely not. But I also wanted to be a flight attendant because I knew at an early age that I wanted to see the world. And I thought that that would be one way of seeing the world. Little did I know that I would have a career that essentially took me across the globe doing really impactful work.
Wow. So before I go on to my next question, I just want to let you guys know that we are at the Swallow restaurant. I'm sure you can hear the noise and the ambience, but we're having a good conversation here. Whenever you are in Accra, make sure that you visit here. It's right next to the Kempinski Hotel. Liz, I remember growing up and telling my dad that I wanted to be an athlete. They called my uncles, my aunties, and we had a meeting. Did you ever, at any point, growing up, tell your parents that you wanted to be a dancer?
I have always been an audacious child. And I had the audacity to share with my parents that I wanted to be a dancer. And, my dad loved music and would listen to Tina Turner. And I remember listening to Private Dancer with him at one point and saying, I think that's the dancer that I want to be. That was disastrous, to say the least. My parents really encouraged us to think outside of the box. They encouraged creativity. And above all else, they just wanted us to be great at whatever we chose to do with our lives. So ultimately, it was my decision, what I decided to do.
How do you think your upbringing molded you into the person you are today?
My family is, till this day, plays such an important role in my life. Some of the decisions I've made, some of the things I've pursued, and some of the things I haven't pursued. Growing up, my dad always said to me, I remember as vividly as probably the age of 5, he would say, to whom much is given, more is expected.
Wow.
And I didn't know what that meant. I never really understood it, but through the actions that my parents, through the things that they did growing up, so Christmas in my house, for example, we didn't get presents in the way that kids get a lot of presents under the Christmas tree. But my parents always had an open house. And on Christmas Day, they'd invite families, often families that were less fortunate, to come and feast with us and to be a part of our celebrations and to be able to have a hamper of sorts to take home with them. And so from a young age, these were things that were important to me, that I knew were important, an important aspect of the way we lived. This ability to give back, to share, generosity of spirit. That's something that's really important in my family and in my home, and something that we just grew up with. How do you not give to someone who has less than you? How do you not care about someone who is less fortunate than you? And it's really interesting that my parents, when I was younger, were not Christians, right? And so they were just good human beings who wanted to make a difference in their communities. As I've gotten older, of course, my faith has also played a role in who I've become and my values and what I believe and how I live.
How was it growing up as a young black woman in America at that time?
When I was younger, so my parents immigrated to the US in the 60s, 70s, and at the time my brother and I were two of only a handful of African Cameroonian children in our community. At the time, a lot of Africans who immigrated didn't immigrate with their children. They came to the US to pursue education and then they returned home. But my parents were outliers in that they brought their kids with them. And when we initially got to the States, it was different. We had different accents. My last name, Agbor-Tabi, is not Smith or it was a bit of a mouthful for people to enunciate. And it was a cultural sort of clash of sorts. But one thing that I'm really thankful for is that my parents made it a point to remind us of where we came from and who we were. And to the extent that they could, they exposed us to our culture and made sure that we understood where we were from.
That's fantastic. So how do you think your career has evolved from being a critical nurse to then going to work for Rockefeller, which is one of the biggest brands that everybody knows, and Rockefeller Foundation? How did that happen?
So it's fascinating. I've always wanted to be of service to humanity, first and foremost. And I've always sought opportunities that allowed me to do that. And, but opportunities have also sought me. And I think, in this life, it's really about preparation, right? When preparation meets opportunity, the magic happens. And that's pretty much been the story of my career. I started off as a bedside nurse. I knew that I wanted to do more. I knew that I wanted to create more impact. And I prepared myself for that. And the opportunity arose, and I was well prepared to take that opportunity. And so that's pretty much been my career trajectory. It's interesting when I get asked about my career, it's one of the areas that I'm incredibly humble about. I don't really like to speak of my accolades or my accomplishments. Part of that is really just because I feel there's so much more to do. There's so much more impact to create. And I want to ensure that whatever I'm doing, I'm also carrying myself and talking about what I'm doing in a way that allows others to be able to see themselves in that space doing similar things, right? And so sometimes it's a bit tricky for me. It's, you know, talking about my accolades. I feel...
Well, you've done so much.
But I have so much more to do.
And you've raised millions. You've done so much. And I think sometimes we are humble as Africans, but I feel like we need to tell and share our stories.
And I do enjoy sharing my stories in hopes that I can inspire, in hopes that any other dark-skinned African girl who is growing up somewhere on the continent or elsewhere can also see that she too can be in a position to be able to uplift her community. And by community, for me, community is a global community, right? I'm originally from Cameroon, but as you know, I love Ghana. I spend a lot of time here across Nigeria, across Southern Africa, etc. But really, it's important that other leaders who are coming up are able to see themselves in these seats that you and I and others like us occupy. And I think for the purposes of inspiring that, I'm happy to share that, I pretty much have kicked ass in a lot of ways and done some pretty awesome things. But there's so much more to do.
So how was your time at Rockefeller, and what made you move from Rockefeller?
Rockefeller was great. So the beauty about being in philanthropy is I've had the pleasure of sitting at both ends of the table, right? So being a funder and being a funding recipient, right? So being a grantee. And my time at Rockefeller really allowed me to be able to impact decision making in cities across the continent. It allowed me to really focus on Africa, right? To work in Africa, where I always say my heart beats happiest when I'm working in for the benefit of Africa's progress. And so my time there was really great in that sense. It allowed me to widen the aperture of my cultural exposure and really to understand deeply what the global crises, the implications of the global crises on the African continent and the context within Africa.
Right. And then, because you worked with a lot with the mayors.
I worked with national governments, I worked with subnational governments, so mayors, governors, heads of state. I worked with philanthropists, I worked with the private sector. My role at Rockefeller was really in bringing together all of these disparate actors who play a role in advancing development on the continent.
And working on the continent, how did you find working with the different governments?
I mean, it's incredibly challenging in some places more than others, but it's also incredibly rewarding. I always say if you can move a needle in Africa, that is a great accomplishment. It requires so much more. It requires more intentionality, right? Investment, resources, and just patience, a lot of patience. But, you know, I've been incredibly fulfilled by the work that I've done here, and I continue to be. Currently, I'm working to eliminate extreme poverty across the globe. And we know that we can't eliminate extreme poverty without a focused investment on this continent. So I'm incredibly thrilled to be a part of this sea of change that still believes in Africa and is still betting on Africa and is still committed to being a part of Africa's growth and development.
Wow. Global citizen, big brand, we hear it all the time, but how did you manage to get a vice president as a black woman? That alone is a huge milestone, right? Talk us through that.
You know, you point out a sad reality for me and one that I grapple with on a daily basis. There aren't a lot of people in seats the sort of seats that I occupy that look like me, that have had my experience, and that's really unfortunate.
That's dark-skinned.
Dark-skinned African women working on African issues in a Western organization or in the Western context, right? And I think until we change that, we're not going to be as effective as we can be in our interventions and in our approach. So for me, it's not a badge of honor to be the only one. I don't like being the only one at the table. It's lonesome. But for me, it's really been about ensuring that I'm in whatever privileged role that I am in, whatever privileged seat that I have merited, because you don't get given things at this point, you know, but whatever I've merited and wherever I am, that I'm also actively creating additional seats for more people that look like me to be part of the table.
I know that you're doing a lot, and what are some of the focal things that you're working on at the moment?
Global Citizen is a citizen-led organization that focuses on activism and advocacy. It's really about leveraging the power of the individual voice. Global Citizen is about telling every man, woman, child, anywhere in the globe that you too can have a say in demanding the world that we all want, a world that's equitable, a world where extreme poverty is not the reality for anyone, anywhere. We are currently working in Accra, as you know, going to be hosting a Global Citizen Festival here on September 24th at the iconic Black Star Square.
Yes.
And really, that's the culmination of a year-long campaign, which we call the End Poverty Now campaign. And really, that campaign is about the urgency of this moment to ensure that we can end poverty for communities across the globe who are impacted by poverty. And, you know, people often ask, what is poverty? How do you define poverty? And poverty is not just about not having money, not having funds to cover the essentials like shelter, clothing, food, etc. It's about agency also. It's about not having access. It's about not having a say in what happens in your community, in your country. It's about not having a say in governance. And so the work that we're doing is really to dismantle some of these systemic barriers, right, that keep communities in poverty. And I'm really excited to be doing that work here in Ghana, to be doing it in Accra.
Fantastic. So in saying that, what is the fundamental things that you work on the ground in these countries?
This year, we're focusing our campaign around sort of 4 critical areas. The first is around ensuring equitable access for girls and women, access to opportunity, and access to women's health, access to reproductive health care, etc. We're also looking to dismantle the systemic barriers that keep communities in poverty, whether that's access to health care, to education, to addressing the hunger crises. There's so many communities that have been thrown deeper into the hunger crises and poverty as a result of COVID. We're also looking to address the global climate crises, which is perhaps the most pressing issue of our time. And then we're looking to amplify voices of advocates, right? And for me, it's especially important that we amplify the voices of Africans speaking on African challenges and African solutions to our challenges.
The Global Citizen is a big event, right? I think the last time, was it in South Africa?
2018 was the first time that Global Citizen Festival came to the continent, and it was in South Africa. On the celebration of Mandela at 100.
Yes, and you had Beyonce, Oprah was there, like the list goes on. And Ghana, we're having Usher.
Usher has a huge fan base here. I think one of the things that's really beautiful about the lineup, which was announced last week, is that we're bringing together a global set of artists and entertainers and a local regional set of artists and entertainers, and just really showcasing the cultural excellence that has emanated from West Africa, right? And putting it on display for the rest of the world to see that, you know, we didn't start doing this yesterday. We've always been good at this, right? And so I think that's what I'm really excited about, is this confluence of, you know, the global versus the regional, national.
Because we have Sarkodie with Stonebwoy, Gyakie, Stormzy,
yes.
Who else is the other one? There's 2 females. There's
H.E.R. and SZA.
Yeah. So how did you pick them? Like, how do you go about? Is there like a committee that kind of picks out the artists?
It's a lot of work. The artists that we work with are all artists who are committed to advancing our policy objectives first and foremost, right? So everyone talks about the festival, but really what this is the culmination of a year-long policy and advocacy campaign, right? And so we seek performers and who are aligned with our policy agenda and who are poised to leverage their voices in advancement of this policy agenda. Ultimately, what we're seeking to do is to get commitments from world leaders and from the private sector, from philanthropy, towards achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, that agenda, right? So we seek artists who support that and who share our vision of advancing our policy imperative.
Fantastic. It's a one-day event, right? One day on the 24th of September. What are we to expect? Because I know that there's a lot of people that are flying in for this. I've had like friends in America who are like, oh my God, I'm coming to the continent, coming to global. How do you get your audience?
So the main festival is on September 24th, but across the week, we're going to be highlighting a host of cultural events. And so many people are flying in for those side events as well. And how do we get our audience? Ghana is a cultural mecca, so to speak, right? And Accra is where tastemakers want to be and want to be a part of this cultural renaissance that I spoke about. And so there's a natural audience for the diaspora that's being drawn here. Africa is a very young continent, right? And so young people who are deeply vested in the creative sector also want to be here. And then everyday citizens across the world who are part of this global citizen movement and who realize the power of music really as that fabric of humanity, right, that really binds all of us, who will also be coming here to celebrate those commitment makers, Africans and non-Africans who are vested in advancing Africa's development.
How do people get tickets or, come to the event?
Tickets to the Global Citizen Festival are free. I think this is one of the things that people are really surprised to learn about. But tickets are free, and the currency for tickets is action taking. So on the Global Citizen app, you can download the Global Citizen app or visit www.globalcitizen.org and take action. And what is taking action? Taking action is using your voice to demand change, right? To demand policymakers and leaders to give us the world that we want, right? A more equitable, a more just world. It's as simple as sending emails, tweets, maybe taking photos and videos, taking a few quizzes, and that earns you the currency to be able, which you can redeem to get a free ticket to the festival.
Okay. How do you see leadership in Africa, sis? I mean, being a leader yourself, what is your definition of leadership?
Leadership for me is about being strong, but also vulnerable and tender. It's about leading with the head and also with the heart. And really, it's about having the humility to know that the call to leadership really is a call to serve. My leadership style really centers humility. First and foremost, I'm a servant. I do the work that I do because at the core, I am audacious enough to believe that little old me and the actions that I take are able to be impactful and to change the trajectory for someone somewhere. And really that's what leadership is about, being bold enough to take on that responsibility when you're called to lead.
How do you see the role of the diaspora?
I'm incredibly thrilled that many of us are now returning to the continent, are investing on the continent, and I would like to see more. I think, this notion of nationalism that many of us in the diaspora have, I think that it's been detrimental for us, right? And so now we've been able to get Ghanaians to come back to Ghana and invest in Ghana. But what I'd like to see is more of us exploring our continent, thinking of ourselves as a, Pan-African body. And I think that until we start to take on that view, we'll be limited in what we can achieve on the continent. You know, I want to see more of us taking vacations in Africa. I want to see more of us investing in Africa. I want to see more of us wearing African couture. And I want to see us prioritizing those things much in the way that we prioritize a family holiday to Saint-Tropez, you know, or the way many of us, self-included, like the French couture labels. I want to see us promoting our own culture and the resources that we have here. And there's so much talent on the continent. I want us to rep that proudly.
It's true. You know, my only thing about traveling within Africa is that it's still so long.
Of course it is. But, you know, leaving from New York to Bali is a 20-something hour endeavor. And you know, if you can go from the US or Europe to Bali, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to go from West Africa to East Africa. When I started working on the continent, it was incredibly difficult. It was, you had to go from east to west, or from west to southern Africa. Many times you had to go back to Europe, right, and travel here. But now there's a bit more ease in traveling. And so I'd like to see us, you know, really take advantage of these opportunities.
And I'm happy now that some African countries, if you're African, you don't need a visa, because that was another thing, right?
Absolutely.
That when you're traveling within Africa, as Africans, you need a visa.
Absolutely. Visa-free travel has been a great equalizer, right, in reducing the barriers to traveling within the continent. But I mean, let's be real here. There's so many of us who have multiple nationalities, right? And that should not preclude us from traveling. If you don't need a visa as a British or American, or, you know, whatever your secondary citizenship is, go out and explore the continent. I want to see more of us doing that with pride also. It's not sort of the, I come home for December in Africa, which, by the way, is my least favorite time to be on the continent. It's just too hectic. It's so hectic, and you know, everyone's here, and but explore Africa and explore off the beaten path, and let's normalize enjoying in Africa.
When you were touring Africa, you know, seeing all the mayors, governors, etc., what would you say one of your favorite African countries that you visited?
As a proud and unapologetic Pan-African, that's always a tough question for me. There are many aspects that I like about certain places on the continent. Culinary, there's always Ghana, there's Senegal. Senegal's amazing. There's Cameroon, of course, home court advantage. And, you know, fashion, there's Nigeria for me. And then there are places on the continent that are just so warm, where the warmth is just palpable from the moment that you arrive. And so I have multiple cities. I mean, I could rattle off a list of at least 25, 30 cities on the continent where I really feel at home, and where I have enjoyed, you know, great times.
Fantastic. Any favorite foods?
You know, well, because I'm in Ghana, one of my favorite foods here is the one that no one really talks about, TZ.
TZ, oh, okay.
That's one of my favorite foods here. And anywhere in West Africa, the culinary scene is just incredibly rich. It's really interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, I love food. You know this about me. You know, I love cooking. You know, I love...
And you love your champagne.
Oh, I love champagne, of course. I mean, eau de vie, as we say in French, you know, water of life. But, you know, being able to explore across the continent, whether that's from a culinary perspective or from the arts or from fashion, has been really great source of joy for me. It's also something that I'm really thrilled to be able to share with my kid.
That was my second question. In all of this, she's still a mother of two. And the youngest is like
9 months old. Yeah, she's 9 months old. And both of my kids are here with me in Accra for this project. You know, I'm incredibly thankful to have the sort of support that I have, which enables me to do this work. You can't do the work that I do without a support system, right? And so I always, when I speak with younger women, especially who say, how do you do this? And I say, well, first off, one of the possibly the most important, the most critical decision that I think as a woman who is ambitious and who has career goals, one of the most important decisions you'll make is who you choose to partner with, right? Whether that's marriage or a life partner or whatever it is, but making sure that you have someone who believes in you even more than you believe in yourself at times, and is willing to support you in achieving what you've set out for yourself. And then also, I often say this, I'm no superwoman. Like, there's so many things that I'm great at and that I prioritize and I'm really intentional about in my life. And then there are other things which honestly I just don't have the capacity and the bandwidth to care about. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay at being mediocre at some things and just really being able to create the space to excel at others. You can't be everything for everyone everywhere, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm often asked, how do you balance? And first and foremost, I don't believe in balance, right? I think that that is an artificial concept that we've put on ourselves, especially as women. It's just a constraint that is not helpful, has not been helpful for me. What I believe in is agility. And agility for me enables me to show up in the ways that I need to show up when I need to show up and as appropriate, right? So some days I need to be a high-powered executive, and that's really important. And some days I just need to be a mom, I need to be a wife, I need to be a daughter, I need to be a sister. But I think being able to understand what my strengths are and how I can show up in the ways that are most impactful, and being intentional about showing up in those ways, I think is probably has been really helpful for me. Yeah, you know, my kids are my everything. You know, I fought long and hard to have my kids. My kids were not a walk in the park by any means. You know, I've been very public also in sharing, you know, my fertility struggles. And, you know, my son was born in India with the help of a gestational carrier. My daughter was born in Wisconsin, right? But, you know, we wanted those kids. We loved them before we even met them, and we wanted them, and we fought hard to have them. And so now that they're here, it's important that in everything that I do, that I'm also creating the space and the time to be able to be present for my kids. Also important for my kids is to grow up seeing a mom who is committed to them and to her family, but also to her society and to something greater than, you know, little old me here. I think that is possibly one of the greatest gifts that I could ever give to my children, is to be that for them.
Did you have that societal pressure as a woman that you need to give birth? You need to be married at a certain time. You know, what we go through in Africa every single day. Did you feel that pressure?
Are you kidding me? So first off, in my culture, like in many African cultures, like your shelf life expiration date is up when you're 25 years old. Like, you better be married and you better be pregnant a year after you're married, right? And I chose the unconventional path in that way. I wasn't married at 25. I barely hit 30. I think I got married at a month before my 30th birthday. And then I also had all of these career aspirations and so many things that I wanted to achieve before becoming a mom. And so I sort of took a little bit of time to pursue those things. Now, it just so happened that once I was ready to start a family, it didn't happen immediately. It was a challenge for me. And so, you know, we explored all of the opportunities. IVF, I mean, we did it all. You know, at this point, I often kid that I could be a reproductive endocrinologist. But, you know, we did it all, but we stopped at nothing. And I share this with such transparency for a number of reasons. So the first is really in that there's no perfect time to become a mother, right? I don't think if I had to do it all over again, I would have started trying to have family a week after I got married. I don't think I would have done that. I think what I do value, again, and this goes back to agility, right? Ensuring that you have the resources in place to be able to make choices, right? I think I would have made different decisions to enable me to have a family when I was ready, right? So like maybe I would have gone into embryo freezing earlier on in my marriage to delay when I have kids, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think those pressures, they're sickening. It's really tough. And I think even as a woman who had a fairly extensive trajectory to motherhood, I don't in any way want anyone to believe that you have to have a baby and you have to get married and you have to do things in this order, in spite of what society's telling us. Like, take your time, live your life, invest in yourself, get to know who you are, get to know what you stand for, right? And seek the ways that you want to be impactful in the world that you live in, and then go have some babies.
Yay! Looking at your journey, I mean, there's must be so many points where it's been extremely fulfilling. What would you say is that moment?
The moment when I was able to be a decision maker and could bring other people to the table. I think that's probably my greatest career highlight, right? It's being, when I've been in roles where I've been able to build a team around me to focus on the work that I'm doing and to be able to influence what that team looks like, right? To make sure that I'm not the only one at the helm that looks like me. I think that probably has been one of my greatest career highlights.
Can you touch on how much you've actually raised?
Well, you know, we've had a number of campaigns, right? We got into the Guinness Book of World Record 3 weeks after the shutdown in New York. We created a campaign at Global Citizen called One World Together at Home, which was really a number of artists performing from their home studios, some of them from their bedrooms, to raise awareness on the COVID crises, to bring us together as a human race, you know, because COVID showed us that whatever happens somewhere, anywhere in the world, has the potential to impact us wherever we are, right? Yep. And so we really are in this together. And to address these problems, we need global solidarity. So One World Together at Home raised $123 million, and we developed that campaign and that broadcast in 3 weeks. And it got us into the Guinness Book of World Record, and you know, we killed it. And then about 6 weeks later, we embarked on another campaign, Global Goal Unite. And this was to raise money towards the ACT Accelerator, which is that global compact which was put together for COVID vaccine development. And through that, we were able to mobilize $7.3 billion with a B as part of that campaign, and really to raise awareness on the social justice movement, which was also at the time, which was top of mind for most people in the world, right? But really making that connection across equity or inequity and the COVID crises, right? We've had a very successful few years in terms of raising awareness, the advocacy that we've driven, the sort of campaigns that we've designed.
Wow. What is your mantra in life?
Well, it depends. So generally, so you know, I'm a creature of enjoyment, right?
Yes.
So in all things that I do, I seek enjoyment. And not to be trite, but really it's about finding joy in everything that you do, creating your own joy, right? The work that I do can be incredibly taxing emotionally, physically at times. Traveling around the world is no walk in the park. I know it seems incredibly glamorous, but it really isn't. But ensuring that wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I'm able to carve out space and finding joy and beauty in even the most mundane of experiences. That's my daily mantra. And then, you know, I'm audacious and I'm bold, but I'm also incredibly tenacious. Like, I'll stop at nothing. I'm relentless.
Wow, love it.
I grew up, my dad always told me, so again, growing up as a dark-skinned girl with kinky hair, I was never the pretty girl. I was never the prettiest girl. But my dad always instilled in me that I was a really smart girl and that I could do anything that I set my mind to. And so I grew up believing, oh yeah, I really could. I could do anything that I set my mind to, and I'm tenacious. One thing I I think that that's probably been a quality that has led me to the places that I've been, is I just never give up.
That's it. You take you don't take a no for an answer, right?
Absolutely
You keep
not.
going.
Absolutely not.
And it is okay to break down, right? It's okay to
Absolutely.
be down at times, but you just have to pick yourself up.
Yeah, so one thing that many people don't know about me is I'm incredibly introverted. At my darkest hour, at my lowest moments, I seek fulfillment from within, right? I'm a woman of faith, and so my faith obviously plays a great role in, lifting me up when I'm down. But I think, having that space to be introspective and to be reflective and to really think about how I can shift the needle in, changing the trajectory regardless of whatever it is I'm dealing with, right? I think it's important, and we need to all, you can be a superwoman. I know there's a lot of superwomen out here. I have a lot of superwomen sisters out here, but being able to create that time and that space for self-reflection and self-care. And self-care for me is not just going to the spa and getting a massage or anything, but really spending time with yourself, with your thoughts, being reflective, being thoughtful. If you are not fulfilled internally, it's so hard to pour out to anyone else. And, that's with your kids, with your spouse, whatever it is. So I'm also a big proponent of carving out me time for me. Sometimes that's traveling alone, and just finding time to do things for myself, things that I enjoy. I have so many hobbies. And my husband's always teasing me because I go from 0 to 100 in everything that I do. A few years ago, I started gardening and growing my own food and all sorts
in America?
Yeah, I have a small garden, have figured out how to make it a prolific garden. But moments like that when I'm in my garden by myself and, just one with nature, carving out time for me is really important.
Yeah, I
Sometimes
think we don't do that.
we think it's selfish, right? So a lot of women say, but how do you do it? Because I am away for work so much. I've been able to travel with my kids for work a lot, which has been wonderful for them. The cultural exposure and all of that has allowed me to be with them. But I'm also comfortable being away from my kids. Some of the best sleep that I've had is on an airplane where I know like my kids aren't crying, they aren't waking up. There's no risk of them waking up and needing me, right? Or when I'm away from home. So, but giving yourself permission, I think that's really important because as moms, as wives, as women, right, we are sometimes so afraid of giving ourselves permission to say, yeah, I'm a kick-ass mom. I'm a great mom, but I am also keenly aware that it's important to carve out time to invest in me to be able to be that mom, that wife, that spouse, girlfriend, whatever it is.
You're absolutely right. We don't do that often. We don't do that enough. Would you homeschool your children?
Oh, heck no.
No?
Are you kidding me? So the pandemic, I learned, I talked earlier about there's some areas where I'm exemplar and there's some areas where I'm mediocre at best, right? I'm not a teacher. I think teachers are undervalued in society. We need to do more for teachers. And, that came to light during the pandemic when we had to homeschool our older child. And I realized quite early that that was not my ministry. Patience is something I've been working on my whole entire life. Like, I'm not a very patient person, but it's something that I'm really intentional about. But I just couldn't get it together. And so what I decided to focus on was to teach my son life skills. Right? So we were baking a lot, and we were doing arithmetic. We were measuring flour and sugar and figuring out addition that way. We were gardening, we were learning about nature. We were spending a lot of time together just talking to each other. And so he has an extensive vocabulary in English and in French.
To those young women who are unsure about what they want to do, who are insecure about themselves, whether it's image-wise or whether it's knowledge-wise, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we all must do, and we must start at an early age, is figuring out who you are. I feel like sometimes the insecurity comes simply as a factor of not knowing who you are. Not knowing who you are, not knowing your purpose, and not knowing how important that who you are is to this broader community of humanity, right? And so I always joke, like, yeah, I didn't grow up being the prettiest girl in the room, and I come from a family of really like physically beautiful people, right? And I
But
also
you're
grew up,
beautiful. I don't
but
see.
you know, but I grew up in a society where this was not the standard for
Okay.
beauty, right?
Okay.
Like classic beauty was not dark skin, was not kinky hair, was not this. I have very strong African features, right?
Okay.
And that wasn't always the standard of beauty. We didn't have products that had models advertising them that looked like me, right? But what I grew up with was a sense of knowing who I was, where I came from, and that helped me to develop what my purpose was in this life, right? And I think that that's where the confidence emanates from. The confidence for me is knowing unapologetically and with utmost certainty that what I have to offer to this world is valid, right? Is valuable, and that only I can contribute that in the ways that I can deliver it. Like, I can't be anyone else. I can't do what anyone else is doing. But what I'm doing is just so important that I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to squander the opportunity to be able to do that, to manifest that which I have been called to do.
Wow, so powerful. Lastly, actually, you just saying what you just said, I read an article today. It says Nigeria becomes first country to ban foreign models in TV ads.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What do you think about that?
Ooh, I mean, that's controversial, right? But, you know, I think rather than thinking about the ban of people who have had access to opportunity, I think first and foremost, let's be proud of what we have here at home, right? Let's put a spotlight on what we have here. We have so much talent. We have so much from resources, and I feel like sometimes that takes the back seat. And so if this gives us an opportunity to promote more and really put a spotlight on that which we have at home, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm proudly and unapologetically African. I can't say that loud enough. Whatever opportunities that we have to ensure that our people are in the spotlight, hey, I'm all for it.
She's all for it, and so am I. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure that you will come to Global Citizen. If you haven't registered, download the app or go on the website now. See you sometime next week.